You're locked into the Dare to Be Great podcast with Manny D. Rosa. Now let's walk this journey together.
What's up, my greats? Welcome to the Dare to Be Great podcast. I am Manny D. Rosa, Jam3 Productions, jam3productions.com. This is episode number one. It's been a lot of work behind the scenes, a lot of stuff in the making. I'll get to that in a minute. A lot of stuff going on behind the scenes before we launched this podcast. I insisted, and I'll get to that a little later. I insisted that this podcast be 100% for my producer community. Everything I've learned along the way, I wanted to pass on. Everything I'm doing with the different legs of my business, I wanted to pass on in case y'all interested in doing the same thing and y'all have questions. You'll want to see what I'm doing. By DNA, I'm normally a behind the scenes type of guy. Stuff I'm working on, I keep it close to the vest. But I insist with this podcast, I'm going to pull back the curtain and give you every week, let you know what I'm working on. Every week I'll have a new subject I want to tackle. So yeah, to give you something, to let you know a little something about me, in case you never heard of me. Yes, I come from a musical family. I often get asked that question. Generation going back to my great grandfather was a musician, Roberto Font. He was also instrumental in bringing salsa music to New York radio back in the days. My grandmother sang. My father is a musician / singer. Spent his entire adult life. He's a percussionist, plays conga drums. I remember being a little kid and my mother letting us stay up late so we could watch him on TV. You know, a lot of great memories from that. The music all the music in my upbringing. My father, I grew up in a household where there was always music, whether it was my father having his musician friends over and then, having jam sessions in the house. My father owned a massive vinyl collection, so there was always music. If there wasn't live music being played, there was vinyl being blasted. A lot of partying in my house. I do not remember ever going to sleep in a quiet house. There was always music blasting. Some way or somehow there was music blasting. I'm born and raised in the Bronx. I always feel like it's an honor and privilege to say that I was born at a place and at a time where I witnessed the birth of hip hop. It's something we did in our borough, not in our city. In the early days, it was something we were doing in our borough, in the Bronx. And I've watched every stage over the years as it developed into this global entity, this global industry. So early on, I think around age 12, I started off as an MC, as a rapper, if you will. I wrote my first lyrics at age 12. I had my childhood friends that I was close-knit to there were MCs in the group, in our group of friends. And so I was a product of my environment. I literally wrote in the house for 2 years. At that time, you couldn't be whack and get on the mic. So I literally wrote for 2 years in private before, attempting to approach the mic at a park jam or whatever. I was part of that whole scene, the park jams and the schoolyard parties and the house parties and all of that stuff in the early days before there was ever any hip hop on record, on radio, or any of that stuff. It's definitely not on streaming. But I was part of that whole scene. So I'm from the early days. I was an MC for many years. Signed to management at one point. Did tons of shows with my brother, who was my MC partner at the time. The transition was made. I think it was made age 21. Is where I had my first rap group actually in junior high school. So I started junior high school writing lyrics And then by ninth grade in high school, I was already doing the talent shows and all of that stuff, and the house parties and getting on the mic and all of that stuff. Shout to my first DJ Izzy Is, DJ Fresh from the Bronx, still doing his things on the ones and twos right now, to this day. Shout to him. My second DJ, Mixmaster Supreme. If it wasn't for him, I'll say it right here on camera. If it wasn't for him, I would not be a producer today. Huge influence on me. He was a DJ and he was a producer. He DJ'd and toured the world with Magnificent Force back in the days. So we would, and he was a producer. He produced greats like Curtis Blow and a bunch of other people. So we would me and my brother would go to his house to practice. And for some reason, I gravitated to watching him make beats for people. And my brother gravitated to watching him DJ, because we used to sit there in his bedroom and watch him practice DJing and stuff like that. So eventually, I remember one time, age 21, he came off tour and he had a Roland TR-909 that he used to travel with. And he sold it to me. And it was downhill from then on and shit. Nah, I'm just playing. He sold me the TR-909, and that was my very first piece of equipment. My very first drum machine was the 909. And as some of you drum machine heads know, the TR-909, like while everybody was rocking the SB12, SB1200, the 808s and all of that stuff, I was rocking the 909. There was literally only one other known producer at the time. Mantronix was rocking the 909. But the 909 was prominently heard on a lot of house records, a lot of freestyle records. But I made it work in those days. I made it work. You work with what you have and shit. So fast forward the 90s, before it was trendy and affordable to have a home studio setup. Throughout the 90s, I had a full home studio setup. We talking about like 5-foot racks of gear, outboard gear. There was no computer, connected to your gear back then. A lot of outboard gear, a lot of analog gear, hardware sequencer, Tascam 4-track reel to reel. We had to bounce tracks to try to increase I won't get into that, but we had to bounce tracks to create more than 4 tracks. Those were the days. That was the fun times and shit. You worked with what you had. Fast forward to today. I own and operate Jam 3 Productions, obviously a music production company. So with this podcast, I want to touch on all the stuff that I do. I want to let you know what I'm working on, and I want to touch on the different aspects of my business, so I can pass on the information, pass on the do's and don'ts. I've made mistakes along the way. I've made mistakes that have cost me money along the way, so I prefer to pass on to you, don't do it this way. It's a little more affordable if you do it this way in my business. So the whole premise of this podcast is to generally pass on my knowledge and stuff. And in the same time, well, I get to that. I want it to be a two-way street, but I definitely want to talk about stuff I'm doing with my production company. I want to touch on stuff with I own Mags Publishing LLC, my publishing entity. We'll get into that. If you want to learn about, my merch line, you want to learn about my beat store, you're interested in doing a vlog. I also, with my childhood friend, one of my high school buddies, is an independent filmmaker, videographer, Ness Tick Morales. I don't know if you've heard of him. If you follow me on social media, you've definitely seen me with him a lot. Just a great human being. You'll see, I'll give you behind the scenes of what we're working on. We're actually in the middle of shooting a video right now. And we'll be developing other projects moving throughout the year. I do my own graphic design. I do my own web design. I do e-commerce. So everything. I do my own marketing, whether it's placing Google ads or Facebook ads or email marketing. So I want to touch on all of that stuff. I want to pass the knowledge on. So if you're trying to figure out what's the next step for you, what else you need to learn, you'll hear me talk a lot about work ethic. We'll be talking we'll be touching on a lot about the mindset stuff, which I think is hugely important. If I had a guess, I'll be touching 50-50 on mindset stuff, 50% mindset stuff and 50% music stuff, because I feel that there's a huge gap in my producer community. A lot of producers I meet along the way, I hear a lot of people like, that's the piece that's missing. Yeah, you can learn marketing and you can learn, but if you're not between the ears, that's the most important thing. You'll hear me. My work ethic is inhumane. I don't take days off. I do take days off. I probably take about 5 days off a year. I work 7 days a week. I work long hours to juggle everything that I do. You'll hear me talk about it. If you're about BS and, tippy-toeing through, you want to be a producer, but you're not willing to put in the work and you want to half-ass it and all of that stuff, this is not the place for you. This is not the place for you. This is for people who really want to work. This is for people who want to chase their goals and their dreams and really build something to take better care of their families. And this is not CEO Instagram, type stuff. This is real world stuff. I'll be talking about stuff that I had to overcome through shit I went through as a kid, in order to be able to build what I'm building. Like there's a lot of walls and stuff and, a lot of traumatic stuff that we go through growing up that you can't be successful in life, while you're dealing with a lot of the stuff and you got a lot of stuff going on upstairs. You know what I'm saying? So I really feel there's a lot of arenas that I'm in touch with. The marketing arena, huge on mindset stuff. The entrepreneurial space, huge on mindset stuff. And I feel like the producer community is lacking in the mindset stuff. So I'll be passing on books that I'm reading. I'm one as equally, I always say I'm addicted to being creative, but by the same token, I'm also addicted to learning. So I'm always reading. I'm always listening to podcasts. I'm always reading books or listening to audiobooks in the car. I'm always learning. I'm always trying to add to my skill set so I can be responsible for my own destiny. You'll hear me talk about my kids because they're the reason why I do everything I do. I insist on putting a stop to generational poverty. We don't hand down nothing to our kids for generations. That's a lot of my motivation for working as hard as I do. I insist on leaving something for my kids when I'm gone. That's huge for me. So what inspires me. We'll talk about what's your why. Why you get up in the morning, what pushes you on those days when I'm tired and I just had 3 days in a row barely getting any sleep and I'm going hard and stuff like that. And what keeps me going a lot of times is your why. You don't want to let people down. If I'm responsible for putting in hours and hours and days after days of work because somebody else got to feed their family because of me, that drives me. That I can't let people down that's in my circle. You'll hear me talk about Tick. A few names that you'll hear me talk about. You'll hear me talk about my daughter, Jackie. You'll hear me talk about Chael, one of my musician friends. He's also an actor. We have a lot of things coming up, whether it's, especially with Tick, you'll hear me talk about, videos we're shooting or working on independent films or a lot of stuff like that. So you'll get to know me and the people in my circle through this podcast. So I'm really looking forward to getting this going. And there's so much I want to throw at you guys, but we'll take it one step at a time. This will be a weekly podcast. Like I said, normally I'm a behind the scenes kind of guy. And a lot of times you can follow me every day on social media and you won't even know what I'm working on. There's tons of stuff that you see I'm working, but you don't know who I'm working with. I usually play a lot of stuff close to the vest or whatever, but in this podcast, I will be telling you what I'm working on. I will be telling you what I'm learning along the way, because it's a continuous learning cycle as you run your business. A lot of us are not like my engineer. Another person that you'll hear me mentioning a lot is D-Trax, Daryl D-Trax, Pierre. my engineer who's mixed all of my stuff since 2013. You'll hear me talk about him. You'll hear me mention him from time to time as well. Just a lot of talented people. That's another thing we'll talk about a lot, is like looking at your circle and removing the dead weight. But normally I play things close to the vest, and I don't talk about what I'm working on or who I'm working with. A lot of people like let stuff out the bag before it's time and all of that stuff. But on this podcast, I will be talking about, I insist on giving y'all step by step what I'm working on, what I'm going through, who I met, what kind of conversations were had, about meetings that I've had, what it took to develop this project, or what we had to do behind the scenes before we started shooting this video, budgets, and like just all the stuff. I want to give y'all the actual stuff, not the Instagram stuff, the actual day-to-day of running my business, day-to-day of what it took for me to grow mentally in order to be able to do what I'm doing today. This podcast will be on your favorite podcast app, and we'll be shooting video also every episode. I don't know if you're watching this, if you're listening to this episode on your podcast, that's cool. These episodes will also be available on YouTube. Those of you watching now on YouTube, you can see me on YouTube. You can see me right now. So you already know. We just built out a full website for the podcast, daretobegreatpod.com. Pod short for podcast, POD. daretobegreatpod pod.com. Where you'll get all the episodes will be there, all the audio episodes will be there, all the video episodes will be there. We're developing different producer tools, like the entire, you'll see a lot of what I do is giving back. This podcast and everything surrounded will be focused totally on giving back to the producer community. So on the website, you'll see we're developing some producer tools behind the scenes. I'll talk about, I think next week I'll be shooting a video where I'm going to give you a tour through my setup and why I made certain decisions with buying certain gear. I think it was a 5-figure upgrade. I won't get into exactly how much, but it was definitely a 5-figure upgrade on my studio setup. I want to give you all a tour for that and why I picked certain things. So with regards to producer tools on the website that are coming, a lot of sound design stuff, and I know a lot of producers maybe don't have access to a big studio where you can, it's a live drummer. We're working on a breaks collection where Chael, which is a musician friend of mine, a really, really, really good friend of mine. We're developing that now to give y'all some real analog drums, totally recorded on 2-inch tape and mixed with analog gear outside the box, like just giving you something that maybe an up-and-coming producer doesn't have access to, a live drummer or a big studio like that. I want to make sure you have access to that. Producer tools, my recent upgrades to my setup, it's a lot of sound design stuff, a lot of analog stuff, a lot of sequencer stuff where I'm creating my own sounds and stuff like that. So I want you to have access to my setup. So we'll be developing a lot of products, to help you all out. Also on the site, producer merch. This is the original, the only Dare to Be Great shirt. This is probably on jamtheproduction.com. You'll see my whole merch line. This is one of the Dare to Be Great shirt, probably the most popular shirt on the collection. We just launched a new Dare to Be Great design t-shirt on the podcast website, daretobegreatpod.com. So you'll see a lot of producer. We're in the process of developing a lot of producer merch for you guys. So that'll be on the website also. Like I said, I'm going to pull back the curtain and I'm going to be offering a lot of information, but I know I'm not the all-knowing. I'm sure there's plenty of yous out there that can teach me and show me what you're working on and give me a peek behind the scenes of what you're doing. I definitely insist that it's a two-way conversation. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that I always post a number you can text. If you have a pen nearby, pencil nearby, your cell phone nearby, get this number down. 917-905-5353. That's 917-905-5353. text producer to that number. And that'll be like the main way we can connect and all of that good stuff. You know, like I said, I insist there's a two-way conversation. I firmly believe that, I believe that nobody successful did it by themselves. So if we can all help each other and we can all move up and work on things together, I definitely want to build a community, and I want to, reach out to y'all. If you're working on stuff, y'all need help with stuff. If I need help with stuff, I want people to reach out to. You never know what projects will come from this and what relationships will come from this. Like I said, I insist there's a two-way street. So feel free to text me to that number, so you can be added to my communication base and all of that good stuff. And that's about it. I just wanted to get on here and introduce myself and tell you a little bit about me, tell you what this podcast is about, tell you what the website is about, how to reach me, and all of that good stuff. All right. So this is Manny D Rosa, Jam 3 Productions. This is the Dare to Be Great podcast. Shout out to everybody in my circle who makes my job easier. Because when you're surrounded, like, I almost feel like I'm surrounded by extremely talented people, so that makes me go harder. You know what I mean? So shout out to y'all. Y'all know who you are. I don't have to go into the names and stuff like that, even though I mentioned a few of them already. But yeah, well, this episode, let me let y'all go. I don't want to be long-winded. I touched on everything I needed to touch on. This is just a introduction episode. Next week we'll get it rolling and see where it goes from there. All right. Peace, and dare to be great, people.